Good morning. Welcome to Time in His Word. The other day, when I broke down in Birmingham and I went to hook up my trailer, my landing gear didn't work. That's the legs on the front of a trailer that when they drop their trailer, disconnect from their trailer, they roll these legs down. The drivers refer to them as a landing gear. There's a rod that runs between the two legs. It's not very thick rod. It's not very heavy duty. It doesn't need to be, because the crank handle on the landing gear has got two speeds. It's got a low, which is super slow for when the trailer is heavy, so that you can move the legs, and then has a high side that is super fast, but you can only use that when the trailer's empty, because if there's any kind of weight on the trailer, you won't be able to move the handle. It's just the way it's designed. Well, anyway, I hooked up to the trailer and I kept cranking that handle, and the leg one side would come up on the driver's side, but the other side wouldn't come up for nothing. And I got trying to figure it out, and finally I went in there and I got a mechanic to come out there and kind of watch for me. And what had happened was that the rod between the two legs had twisted. And it was, as I looked at it the next morning, it's just old, it's rusty. And so I spent the morning running around town getting a new rod. Little did I know they come in one size. And I ended up having to go back to the place that I bought it at for them to cut it, because I didn't have no kind of tools. And I ended up having to get another mechanic there at the garage that was at. He came out with a grinder and cut the old one off because it had rusted so bad. But what I'm getting at is there's a verse in Matthew, and it says, in the 6th chapter, verse 3, it says, "But when you give to the poor, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." And while I was messing with that landing gear, I kept thinking of that verse. What a perfect example of this verse. Because the right side didn't move at all, but the left side, I could crank it up and down. In fact, one side, at one point, I had the trailer at an angle. I had been messing with it so much, trying to figure it out, trying to get that leg to go up. So that breakdown right there really brought this verse to life. But what I want to talk about this morning, though, is the verses preceding that. It covers quite a bit of stuff about giving to the poor and so forth. It says, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before men to be noticed by them. Otherwise you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. So when you give to the poor, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that you may be honored by men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full." And this is verse 3 again. "But when you give to the poor, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving will be in secret, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." And then the next verses talk about prayer. And it talks about the hypocrisy of praying real loud and long prayers that are just full of nothing, so that people can see that you can pray. And it's saying, don't do that. In verse 6 it says, when you pray, go into your inner room, close your door with your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. This passage to me talks about doing things, whether it's helping the poor or as I mentioned in prayer, you do them, you get asked to do prayer in public, and that's fine. But the passage is what it's getting at is, don't make it this long, drawn out speech. Just be quick and to the point. And then when you go in private to pray to the Father, that's when you pray. You want to pray a long prayer, but because that's between you and Him. But what the passage to me, and what I've always understood it to be, what it's getting at is, don't do things in public for public recognition. because that's the rewards you're going to get at that moment and no more. And it's just like I said, though, there are times when you're asked to pray in public, and that's fine. And it's a community prayer. You just make it simple, and you don't make it this long, drawn-out deal. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's the same way with giving to the poor. You give because you want to give, not because it's for a spectacle. I'm always impressed by entertainers who have a large platform, and you don't know for years that behind the scenes they've given thousands of dollars to this organization. They've bought people who needed cars quietly. They whatever, you hear about these things and you're thinking, wow, never thought that person would do that. But to me, they're bringing this passage to life, because while they have a platform, a public platform, and they can just as easily call a news conference and say, I'm giving $10 million to this organization. But they don't. They do it in private. And to me, that is more powerful that speaks more highly of their character than anything, because they're not in it for the public admonition. They're in it to please God, or they're in it because they were raised that way. And that's what I'm getting at today. When you do these things, you do them quietly. Nobody needs to know. And if it comes out, and then usually, yeah, I did that, but I don't need the recognition. I did it because I want to. So think about that today. I learned a valuable lesson. It really showed me that scripture just by replacing that rod. I was out $100 because I had to buy a drill and some drill bits. But both legs now go up and down. And it was just that rod that was busted. So think about that. Think about that the next time you go to give charity. Are you giving because you want to give? Or are you giving so that people know that you give to charity? There's a difference there. When you pray in public, are you praying just something simple and to the point? Or are you making it this long, drawn-out spectacle where it's just a word salad? But the one thing we need to remember is verse 3. But when you give to the poor, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving will be in secret, and your Father who sees what you've done in secret will reward you. Which would you rather have? A reward from our Father, or the reward, the applause, the pat on the back from the people in the public that see you doing it? Which one's going to have greater value to you?